What's up, everybody? This is Ron Harris going live. I finally figured out how to rotate my phone correctly. Give us a little pat on the back for that. Let's see if you guys got any questions. Any questions for me? I'm gonna hit F5 refresh. Got my PC in front of me. One thing you probably noticed with some of the pros, amateurs, even regular gear users is they're probably if they're smart, they're probably a little bit smaller and softer at this time of the year. Unless they're already starting their prep for the Arnold Classic or something. And the reason they're doing that is to try to let their bodies get a little healthy, at least for a couple months before they go back on larger amounts of gear. So this is a time of year when a lot of bodybuilders who are PED gear users, they will clean out, so to speak. Most of them will stay on a small amount of gear. They'll stay on a TRT dose of 200 milligrams to 300 milligrams. Some of them will go higher. Some of them will be in the 400 to 500 range. But if they're smart, they will take at least part of the year off and take the doses way down to let everything settle down. Just it gives the system a break because all the gear does. It does definitely take a toll on the organs, the heart, the kidneys, things like blood pressure, your liver enzymes. A lot of reasons why you should definitely, if you're a gear user, you should at least go on very low doses for a couple phases during the year. Anybody who's blasting tons and tons of gear all the time, they're going to run into health problems. Very, very few of them are going to be fortunate enough to escape problems. It's inevitability. I'm looking for questions. I don't see any yet, guys. Not sure this thing's working properly. Let me hit F5 again. Oh, why didn't you ever go pro? I tried to go pro. I did. I only did a few pro qualifiers. I started competing in 1989. I didn't feel like I was ready for the national stage until 2009. So, geez, that was 20 years later. Yeah, wow. So I did Team U in 2009, did light heavies, got 9th place out of like 13 or 14 guys, so obviously no pro card there. I came back in 2011 as a heavyweight. I got second in the men's open. At the Team U, in the open class, only the overall winner goes pro. So and he didn't win that. David, is it true that bodybuilders guest pose all year round, don't stop cycle? Yeah, let me get to that in a minute. I didn't go pro. I tried a few times. I could keep trying. If that was my main priority, I would be competing all the time. I would keep competing. I haven't competed since 2013. It's not that big a priority for me anymore. I would love a pro card, sure. Who wouldn't, right? But yeah, it's a lot of time and effort, and I have other priorities now with this job. My son's in college, so putting him through school with no loans, and he's not gonna have any debt when he gets out of college, which not too many people can say these days. So let me get back to that question. Someone asked, is it true that if somebody looks like they're big and full and ripped all the time, and you see their Instagram pictures and videos, whether this be a pro bodybuilder that guest poses and does appearances, or just somebody that's an Instagram model, somebody that's got a lot of followers, and they put out content or YouTube channel, whatever, there is a certain pressure for them to look that way all the time. So they can't really go off because you can't look like you're on drugs unless you're on drugs. Drugs give you an extra fullness to the muscles, a harder look to the muscles. They do help you burn more fat because you have more muscle mass. Certain steroids, like Anavar, actually do help you cut fat. And then there are the fat-burning drugs, clenbuterol, thyroid meds, the dreaded DNP. I know people that are running that stuff all the time. Is it healthy? Absolutely not. It's not even healthy to be that lean all the time. If you're looking like you're ready to step on a contest stage all the time, unless you're naturally one of those rare people that's extremely lean, no matter what. Like I have known a few people over the years that they didn't have to do cardio. They could eat, they didn't even have to eat that clean, and they stayed ripped. Most of them did have extreme difficulty adding muscle mass. So it wasn't like a perfect situation. They had to eat a ton of food. How did you start bodybuilding? How did I start bodybuilding? Okay, so we're going back a long time, guys. I'm working out for a long time. When I left gym for some weeks, I lose all those gains. Yeah, don't you can't stop working out. It's you got to consider every workout, every meal is like another penny in the bank, and put enough pennies in the bank, put a little change in the savings every day. Eventually, you're going to have a good amount of money. Eventually, that's how bodybuilding is. You have to be consistent with the workouts, the meals, all that, the sleep. Every day that you gain a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of muscle, it adds up over time. But it takes, you know, unless you're a genetic freak, unless you're on a ton of drugs, and even if you're on a ton of drugs and your genetics aren't that great, you're not going to gain massive amounts of muscle. Unless you have the right genetics, you're not going to be as big as a Rolly Winkler or a Big Ramy. It's never going to happen, no matter how many drugs you take. But I would say for anybody, consistency is key. We all have our own genetic potential, and you can maximize that potential by training very hard, by eating very, very well, and by sleeping, getting plenty of rest consistently every day, week after week, month after month, year after year. If you do that for years, I guarantee you, no matter what your genetics are, you're going to look so much better than when you started, so much better. You'll look good enough so that the average person who doesn't follow bodybuilding, they're going to be very impressed by the way you look. You go to the beach or whatever, and people are going to be like, wow, that dude or that chick, they're in shape, they're jacked. Anybody that's consistent with it for a number of years, you're going to get really good results relative to yourself. You're going to look much, much better than you did. We all have different genetic potential. Some of you, you're never going to look as good as me. Some of you, you're going to be able to look way better than me. We're all different. We all have a different blueprint, a DNA blueprint that we're born with, as far as our bone structure, our muscle bellies, the attachments, the shape of the muscles, body fat distribution. There's so many different genetic components involved. If you get into gear eventually, a lot of you will, you'll notice that some people respond much, much better to drugs than others. That's a real thing. What do you think about 300 mg of equipoise for long-term use? Navy, is that all you're going to use is equipoise? I don't think equipoise. I'm not a gear expert. I don't claim to be. I do know a little bit, enough to answer basic questions. Equipoise is not a good standalone drug as far as I'm concerned. It's great if you stack it with test. I think every cycle should have test as the base, and that's when you stack other things with it. EQ and test and anthate, but in TRT dosage, you're not going to get crazy results on 300 milligrams a week. Most guys will use between, to be honest with you, 500, 600, 700 milligrams. I think 5 to 600, I think, is plenty. 300 might be plenty. I think a big mistake a lot of guys make now, and they've been doing this since gear use began, I'm sure, is they'll start out too heavy on the dose. And if you do that, you'll never know if less would have worked just as well. So why not start with 200, 300 milligrams, see how you respond, and then if you don't get the results you want, then you can add a little bit more. But if you start at a gram of test, a gram of DECA, a gram of tren altogether, as some guys do, you'll never know if a fraction of that could have given you the same results. Because, the more drugs you use, it's obviously you're spending a lot more money and you're putting a greater strain on your whole system. So I encourage anyone who's going to start, I don't talk people into using gear, and I don't talk people out of using gear. I'm pro-truth. I think if you're an adult, you make your own choices, whether it be performance-enhancing drugs, recreational drugs, whatever you do in your life. That's your life. That's your decision. None of us should be in a position to tell other people what to do with their lives and their bodies. I can make recommendations. Yeah, TRT dose I think most guys would do very well on 300 milligrams of test, 300 milligrams of DECA or equipoise, at least for a while. But that's the thing is, when you use gear, as time goes on, you do need to use more and more to get the same results. It's like any drug. I mean, people start out drinking, it's a good analogy, I think. Let's say you start off drinking when you're a teenager. Maybe 2 beers get you drunk. But let's say you drink every weekend of your life. You started at 16, say you're 35. What do you think 2 beers does for you at age 35? You've been drinking all that long. It's not going to do much. You're going to need a lot. You probably need to have 12 beers or 15 beers or maybe shots of whiskey or something. So start light, guys. If you're going to use gear, start with less. And if you need more as time goes by, you can always add more to your dose. But why not start light? Start light. It's cheaper. It's easier on your body, and you'll know. But getting back to that thing, as far as I do think social media has put pressure on a lot of people to stay on drugs all the time, year round, 24/7, which was unheard of back in the day. Do you think nowadays bodybuilders take more things than the old school bodybuilders that passed away? Well, there are more things to use now. I don't know, HMB. Supplement stack. I'll get into supplements later. Yeah, there are a lot more drugs now. It's not just drugs. We have all these peptides. We have SARMs. There's growth. There's insulin. There's a wide array of drugs that people can and do use today. I don't know how much Munzer and Momo used. I do think the doses tend to be higher now. And one reason is because back then, guys were still able to get pharma grade, pharmaceutically produced steroids back then in the early mid 90s, whereas now, good luck unless you have a prescription for it. So you're getting underground gear, and unfortunately, one problem is underdosing. Unless you have a lab that can tell you exactly how much is in your gear. You have a bottle that's of Deca. It says it's 300 milligrams per mil. How do you know it really is? You don't, unless you can get a lab to test it. Maybe it's actually 200. Maybe it's 100. So guys tend to use a lot more dosage because they're not sure of how much is actually in these bottles. So they'll take 3 grams a week of crap, hoping to get at least a gram and a half of actual drugs. That's a situation we're in because steroids are against the law in most countries, USA for sure. We can't buy them. We can't buy them legally. Can't use them legally without a prescription. And we run into that. Amount of sets and reps to get the most muscle to the quads. Quads can take a good amount of volume. I believe you need to use a lot of rep ranges. I think that's where a lot of guys go wrong. A big mistake I see with guys training legs that they're not getting results is they're training more like powerlifters. They're doing a lot of sets in the 4 to 6 rep range. I see that on squats a lot. And, I was guilty of it, but I also always did higher reps. You can't just do lower reps for the legs. They do need a mix. So you want to do some sets that are heavier. Like I used to do a lot of heavy squats and hack squats where the reps would be as low as 5 or 6. But then I would also break it down. I would take weight off the bar, and then I would do a set of 20 reps, or I would take some plates off that, or the leg press, I would do heavy reps. Testosterone propionate, I recommend inject the day before and the night if I want to train hard on Monday. First of all, why are you using test propionate? It'd be so much easier for you if you just switched over to cypionate or an anthate, and then you don't have to inject as often. But yeah, propionates, I don't know the half-life, but if you find out the half-life, it'll tell you. When you do one cycle, have result, good luck in your mind. I lost that one. Bodybuilding physiques back then. Now I remember seeing you said the muscles were more dense back in the day. Why did guys look denser back in the day? I don't think it's just because of the training, although I do think the training. I think guys did use mostly free weights back in the day because that's all there was. They didn't have a lot of machines. One thing I've noticed is we see weak chests a lot now. I see a lot of guys, even pros, with massive shoulders, massive arms, and the chest is just not where it needs to be. It doesn't match. And I do think it's because a lot of guys are using more machines now. And, I use machines now because I have to, because I have no shoulder joint left here. But if you're a young, healthy guy, you should be doing barbell bench presses, dumbbell bench presses. Best competitive cycle. Go back to Ask Dr. Testosterone. He did we answered that question, and we have all the questions not watermarked, time stamped in the comment section on those, because he did hit that. Pro, do you think social media desenses people? Do I think Phil Heath goes hard on the drugs? I don't know what he does for drugs. I'm not even going to speculate. But social media has definitely desensitized people, because now we see so many people every day, men and women, with these perfect bodies. It's like not a big deal. There are a lot more people looking good now than there ever were before. A lot more people not necessarily compete, but they look like they could compete. They have excellent physiques, and you're bombarded with it on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook every day. Will Sean Roden be back on stage? Sean will not be back on stage until, it doesn't matter the contest, until his case is over and done with. It's the modern bencher. I feel the benches from the past. I don't think it's a bench. I think people back in the day did bench press. If you look at the pumping iron guys, that era, Arnold, Franco, Lou Ferrigno, Dave Draper, Robbie Robinson, Mike Katz, Ken Waller, Ed Corney, they all had these massive, thick, dense chests, top to bottom, side to side. It was a thick, dense set of pecs. All these guys had that. There were no weak chests back then. And what did they do? They all did barbell bench press, barbell incline press, dips, plenty of dips. They did heavy dumbbell flies. That's pretty much all they did, because that's all they had. Reps generally, best results when done as quick bursts, very slow tension. Exactly. You didn't read my full comment. Yeah, these comments are going by so fast. I'm sorry. I'm missing some of them. As far as rep speed, I used to believe in going slow up and slow down, because that's the way I got it from Arthur Jones's writings. We stopped waiting for Kai Green. Yeah, I'm not waiting for him. But I believe, most of the people I've ever talked to believe, explosive rep, come up fast, squeeze the muscle, come down, control it slow. That's the best. A lot of people say Flex Ware, the most impressive Zeke. I saw Flex in his prime. I was lucky enough to be there when he won he won the USA and most of his shows. The only big win of his I missed was the first Arnold Classic, but I did see him the week before at the Pro Ironman. He was definitely, I'd have to say, he was probably the best physique in terms of a total package, size, shape, symmetry, flow. It was damn near perfect. Most impressive physique I ever saw, I'd probably have to say Ronnie Coleman around like 03, 02, 03, 04. I'm sorry, 03, 04, probably his best years. Impressive with Coleman just proves who you work out with doesn't matter. Will I ever do an ARCS muscle interview? And no, they'll never do an MD interview. Staying on a diet while cutting for a show. Staying on a diet, that's a good question. I prepped many times, and of course, we're all tempted, because anytime you're around food you're not supposed to eat, the temptation is, especially if any of you guys have kids, it's even worse, because your kids aren't on diets. I dieted for almost all my shows with my kids, and they had, fruit snacks and cookies and all kinds of, they didn't eat that healthy, trust me. Then every weekend we'd be off to some kid's birthday party, and there'd be birthday cake and pizza and all kinds of good crap. You just have to really want to win, is all I can tell you. Is, for me, I what did it for me is I knew my genetics weren't great. I knew that. My structure, not that great. I was never going to be the biggest guy. My shape was never going to be the best. So for me, I knew condition, and I'll give Palumbo credit for this, because it's something he said, and I think until he said that, it didn't really sink in, and this was probably like 15 years ago. The one thing you can always control is your condition. You can't necessarily control your size. We're all most bodybuilders, we're trying to get as big as we can. It just doesn't. Most of us never get as big as we want. The one thing that's always going to be in your control is condition, and that's what you put in your mouth. What are you eating? What are you not eating? How much cardio are you doing? Things like that. So anytime I was tempted to eat crap, I would think, well, there's some genetic freak out there, and if I eat this, he's definitely going to beat me. But if I can come in shredded and this genetic freak comes in looking a little soft, maybe I'll beat him. And I did that happened many times. I was able to beat a lot of these guys that had way better genetics. They had prettier shape, they had more size, but they just came in way out of shape. I remember, probably the best example is the year I got 5th at the Masters Team U. I trained at Gold's in the 90s. I'll get to that. Early 90s. There were guys in the Masters. It was an over 40 class at the 2013 Team U. Everyone over 40 was in one class. So some of us were, I was like 204 pounds. The guy that won was 280 pounds. There were people from, there was 24 of us. And I think the weights ranged from 150 to 280. He was a big